All right. Hello again. Um, Trying something slightly different with the camera here. Hopefully it doesn't go falling over. Anyway, it's been a little bit since I posted a video, but that's mostly because I was wanting to concentrate on the pages I was working on, and they were definitely giving me some problems. This is probably the worst of them. The other ones I was doing, I finally, after much whiteout, finally got through it. Finally got it to a point where I was content with it. But this, okay, so first of all, I guess I should fill you in that this is actually page 13 from chapter 3 of Hyperspace Pockets, Enchanted Night of Fantasy, which I've been working on since like November. And this is now May the 4th. May the 4th be with you. Happy Star Wars Day to all who celebrate. And the pause that I took to work on the strip game was also sort of a time I took to kind of recalibrate my focus on this particular story, because I kind of ran into a wall. This page in particular was giving me a couple sets of problems. And okay, so this is page 12 of the same story. And by the way, spoiler alert. If you want to see the story, I've got, let's see, page 2 came up on my Comic Fury yesterday. So the website's hyperspacepockets.thecomicseries.com. You can check it out there. So I've got this scene going on. I'm not going to get into the details of the scene, but wide panel, and then I went to this two shot, and I stopped drawing this scene here, and these two panels sat undrawn. I got this one finished more or less. I added some detail to it the other day, but I got this one more or less finished with the figures and all that, and the wormhole back in like February, January, something, and it sat for a long time, which that happens. I do that a lot. I don't always finish a page at the same time, because I knew that these two panels were going to be into the next location, and I wanted to really get a sense of the location before I started, drawing these. Finally got around to working on these two panels last week, and I think it was towards the end of the week. I did the last two pages of the scene first, and then this is the first page of the scene, and I think it's like 6 pages total. And hated it. I hate it now. It took me a long time to figure out why, though. My instincts were just telling me something was wrong with it. I thought maybe it was because I put this tree in front of this island, and it all looks like a mess, and I'm just like, it's too. I realize that the problem is it's too small. I'm shifting to a new location. I have this giant panel that really doesn't need to be giant, and I have this tiny panel that needs to be bigger. So along with that, I realized that that's what I'm going to have to do, is redraw. I hate doing that because it's very time consuming, but like I showed you in the patch video that I did a while back, sometimes you just got to fix stuff. And with a page that's composed wrong, the only way to really fix it is to redraw it. So that's what I started working on here. I don't know how clearly you can see it, but here we have what will be the replica of the first panel with Idris and Clint. I'm going to add some extra figures from the crowd, just to give it a little bit of framing. They'll probably be mostly silhouette. I'm going to have what is the second panel with Clint falling and hitting into the mud. Right now I have that moving this direction. I'm not sure that that's working. It absolutely goes against the rules of flow for comics. I was trying to do that on purpose and make it work, breaking the rules, but it's just not. Um, I kind of like how it goes like this and then here, and then I have the tree here, and it draws through here. So probably what I'll end up doing is I'll draw this panel and this panel, and then once I get these situated, and then figure out if I need to flip this or maybe add another moment in here. Um, this is where the job of being an artist really starts leaning into the storytelling, and I start feeling more like a cinematographer in a film where it's not just about drawing good pictures, it's about making sure that I'm clear in the storytelling, that I'm achieving the mood that I want, and that's where this page really I think fails. Is it's technically it's a good, this panel kind of isn't so great. It's not clear here at all. This panel achieves what it needs to achieve more or less. This panel I think is really good actually. But as part of the story, it's just not accomplishing what I needed to accomplish. It's not the right mood for sure. And that, it took me a long time to figure that out. I had to ponder it for the better part of the weekend. I think I worked on this Thursday, so today's Monday. I think I pondered it for till about Saturday. Sometimes you just got to step away from it and let it percolate in your subconscious before. I have to do that anyways. I have to let it percolate in my subconscious before I really get a good grasp on what's wrong and how to fix it. Because, if it's a bad drawing, that's easy to spot usually. But if it's something that's, drawn well and it just feels wrong, sometimes you got to let it go. And so, first things first. Okay, so I have a panel border here. Usually I start with the panel borders, but I know I want to break this panel border. I was debating on if I want to have this bleed up around the edges a little bit. You gotta watch that with a split scene like this with two different locations. Because I was initially going to have this tree like further over and kind of creeping up this side, but that gets distracting. And it pulls the eye in directions that I don't necessarily want it to go. So, because I start off my pages so incredibly loose, I have to be kind of cleanly aware of those things before I start hemming myself into problems. Let me know if this kind of information is interesting. I know there's tons of drawing videos out there. Most of them focus on the the process of drawing, and that certainly comes along with what I'm doing here. But I don't see a whole lot that are like, okay, this is why I'm making this decision, and this is why I'm making that decision, and I could do this, but I'd rather do that. Composition has a bit of a different purpose when you're making comics, and I want to kind of dive into that aspect of it because I don't see a ton of that. I mean, some people do some of that. Dave Finch does a great job of that in his videos. So, yeah, you just tell me if that's interesting or not. That'd help a lot. When I'm making my panel gutters, my typical measurements are if it's a horizontal gutter, one between two tiers, of panels, I typically make that one a 1/4 inch. And then if it's a vertical gutter between, this pen is not cooperating, between side-by-side panels, then I'll make that one 1/8 of an inch. I feel like that kind of draws the eye across first. I personally find that bit of white space to direct the eye quite a bit. I recently replaced my Pigmas microns with this FW pen. It has actual India ink in it and it's refillable, but the nib, it can be a little bit finicky. Sometimes it'll clog up on the tip and I have to kind of clean it off, or even on the back end of it, it has this plastic nib with a point on it, and it's got like, it's a hollow tube and it's got little cuts in the end as well as the hole in the tip, and it has a bit of a flex to it, but my speedball ink that I typically use is a little on the thin side, so I have to be very careful not to over prime it because it'll just splurt all over the place if I'm not careful. There we go. Usually one pump will do it. That one took 3. See how it goes. And then a lot of times it'll get ink in the collar, and you really have to watch that because I'll go and pick it up after it's been capped for a little bit, and there'll be a bead of ink on the tip. If I don't get that cleaned off, if I don't notice it, it'll just splatter all over the paper. Or on my ruler. Yeah, a little bit. That's not bad. Okay. So I think I'm going to start with this panel. Definitely going to give it a bit of a perspective grid because it's a natural panel, because it's outdoors and it's all nature. You don't have to be super precise with the perspective. The reason I use a perspective grid on anything that's sort of zoomed out is because it helps me get a sense of where the camera is placed. And I know a lot of folks have a lot of problems with camera angle, especially new comics artists. Personally, the way I do it is a little bit different of a mentality. What I think of is as the horizon line, and I think this is probably the most scientifically accurate, is the horizon line basically functions as whatever the viewer's line of sight is. So in this case, I want Clint to be a little bit lower. I think this back shore, because this is supposed to be a river here, and then trees in the foreground, an island, because this is modeled after a local river connection we have here in Dayton. So this is going to be where the connection is. This is a chunk of land that sticks into the two rivers joining together here. This will be the back shore, and then of course the front shore. So the question is, I'm expecting the horizon line is going to be around here somewhere. I probably am not going to tilt it. The real question is where do I want to put my perspective point, my viewer point? This is more or less going to be a 1-point perspective. I think with Clint being here off to the side, let's It's not quite 2/3. If I put it in the center, that'll put him off center. If I put it in line with him, that'll put him more in a focus point. I think I'm just going to go with center. I'm using this 300 paper, Strathmore 300. Let's see. Which doesn't have any lines. And one of the big reasons why I use the 200 with the pre-printed lines is that it just speeds up this math stuff for me, which I am not good at. So, all right. So what we have is this crosshairs effectively. This represents the viewer. So me, you, anybody that's looking at this panel, this is basically where you're going to have. I pretend it's like a camera, and I'm moving that camera up and down depending on how I want the scene to be shot. And then this is how I represent that. So this X in the circle in the middle, that's basically where the camera is. This is 1-point perspective. I want to give it a tiny bit of a skew because I almost always add a bit of a skew to my perspective just to kind of make it feel a little closer. How I do that, because it's this panel, the camera is up higher and it's kind of a down shot. What I'm going to do is skew the vertical lines. So typically what I'll do is I'll take my gridded ruler here, and if I want it to really be skewed, I give it like from here to here, I'll give it maybe 1/4 of an inch. This one I don't want it to be so skewed, so I'm going to give it just 1/8 of an inch, maybe not even. And then every time I slide it across, I line it up to the panel border and the end border, and I just keep those same 1/8 of an inch and then flat on here. And that keeps pushing those lines slightly more skewed. And it lets me line it up without using some fancy tool to do it. And I go the opposite direction here. Since I'm right-handed, I have to kind of slide it around. Let's see. So 1/8 of an inch on this side of the line, and then lined up there. On other panels where I want it to be really far, like really skewed, I might, go as far as 1/2 an inch. Or if I want sort of a false fisheye effect, I'll push it further as I get towards the edge of the panels. And that sort of gives it an additional bend in the perspective as I go outward. Like I said, I'm really bad at math, so I kind of cheat at the perspective stuff a little bit. And then this I'm just going to keep parallel. A lot of times I'll use 1.5 inches between each line because I don't need it to be super tight. I find it clutters up the image a lot for my own eyes, and I end up losing things pretty quickly in there. I got a little bit off center. Sorry if my arm's in the way. I got the tripod right beside my left arm, so I'm kind of working at it as I go here. But I'm lining up the center line to the 1/8 inch lines, or it's actually the 16th inch lines, because I can see it in between the grid, and then just connecting here and here to make sure it's lined up. I'm not super particular about these. I need to get them approximately where they go, but I don't worry too much if they're a little bit askew. I found out years ago that it's more about getting the flow of the image rather than getting it super precise. And if it is super precise, it just kind of zaps the energy out of it, especially on something like this. It's a natural scene. I'm doing the converging points. For about 20 minutes. Okay. My last video went 45 minutes, and that hasn't gotten a whole lot of views, so I'm aiming to keep them under half an hour now, just to see if that helps with the algorithm. All right, that'll do. So I opted to put the sunset in the back because this is towards the west. It's facing west in real life, so I'm kind of mimicking that, definitely mimicking that here. The previous scene takes place in the dark, and that's established early on. So having this set in the sunset will help to reinforce the fact that this is a different location. And I'll go ahead and start inking with my brush. Get this tree roughed in real quick. Try not to jump into the inks too quick because sometimes that'll cause me problems, but you know, with time and experience, I've gotten a little more comfortable with doing that, being a little cavalier with it. Knowing that I can fix it later certainly helps. But also, I find the ink, it just, I don't know, my brain registers it better than the pencil. It feels solid in a way that the pencil doesn't, especially because I use sort of a medium pencil with my HB. But I also, you know, my eyes aren't great. I've said that before, but the gray of the pencil competing with the black of the ink can get a little bit messy for me to watch, to look at. So I'm just trying to hack that. Poor brush isn't wanting to keep up today. All right. And with that, I'm going to end this one. I appreciate you coming along. I hope that was an interesting, different perspective on the whole situation. No pun intended, but I like it. So, puns. They're fun. Thanks a lot. See you soon.